I just finished this book, The 7 Frequencies of Communications, and from it, 2 things that I learned out of reading this book that I want to share with you is one, the fact that you'll learn the way in which you communicate, but then secondly, you'll have a greater appreciation with the way that others communicate. And so to dive into it, I came across this book thanks to a podcast, which I'll link down below, of the writer and author of this book, Pastor Erwin McManus. And in listening to the podcast, long story short, it was just phenomenal in the way he broke down different ways and forms of communication, as well as the way in which he has come into his space of pastoring, of leading the church in which he pastors, as well as having his children and family work alongside him in doing so. And after reading and watching that podcast, I was like, oh snap, okay, I need to get the book. I need to read the book. And truth be told, it is not a long read. I think I read it in total for probably 5 days, truthfully. And it was so good that I even took it to work, read it during my lunch break, and was so engulfed in it that now I'm excited to share about it. And truth be told, I do read books along the way in life. However, I don't always share. So this moment is one to commemorate. So that's why there's a video. However, in it all with all great people, the first thing as it pertains to learning your communication style is the fact that in this book, it talks about 7 ways of communication. Yes, it says 7 frequencies of communication, which, hey, sometimes frequency can rub people the wrong way. So we can say frequency, we can say methods, we can say ways, but ultimately there are 7 different types of communication styles that are pointed out in this book. That being a motivator. You're a motivator, right? Or you're a commander in your speech. You're a challenger in the way that you speak. You're a healer in the way that you speak. You're a professor in the way that you speak. Or you are a seer or a maven. And so I felt like I put up more fingers than 7, but no, I did 7. Okay. Yeah, 7 different frequencies of communication. And the beautiful thing is some of us operate within multiple forms of those different communication styles, types, and frequencies, if you will. And so the beautiful thing is we get to read about how these different ways of frequencies go about communicating. And so the motivator is different than the challenger. Obviously, the challenger is different than the commander. And the beautiful thing is you get to read and self-reflect. So even as you read the book, as I was reading the book, I was reading it to understand, but then I was also reading it to apply. And that's a whole nother dynamic of reading that I love to do, which is why I love different books like this that I can read and apply to my life directly. Like, I don't like the books that you have to read a book and then there's a workbook about the book, or you have to get a dictionary next to the book to understand whatever it is the book is trying to say. Like, no, allow for me to read your book and apply into my life what I am reading out of your book. But that's neither here nor there. However, all in all with it all, finding out the different types. And I was like, oh snap. Like, I could see myself a little bit of a motivator. I could see myself a little bit of a challenger. I could see myself as a father being a commander, right? But nonetheless, I was like, okay, this is good. And then it gets to a part of the book where it asks you to reach out to others to see how they receive you. And this was fun. Like, I must say, I did it by way of social media posts, but then as well, I directly messaged people and asked them. There's a part in the book where it says, hey, giving different prompts of, when you hear me speak, do you hear me more so being a motivator, commander? And it has like a question for each one. And to get back the different responses that I received, I was like, oh, this is cool. Because yes, I may have read the book as I did and saw myself in the different forms and frequencies of communication. However, what really matters is how people perceive you and the way in which you communicate. Because it's one thing to say a thing, but it's another thing to receive the things that are being said. And so as I was reading the book and as I did the poll, if you will, I got back various responses. And the ones in which caught me off guard the most was the ones from my wife, because she was saying to me how she receives from me, but then ultimately she responded in the way in which she desires to receive from me. So I'm like, hold on, like, are you subliminally trying to tell me something, or are you really just letting me know how you truly feel? And so like that was fun, that was cool in a sense, because the answers that she gave, I could see myself speaking in that way for certain moments. However, overall, I believe the collective thoughts was the same, and it was cool because certain people responded in the way of healer, and I could think back to the conversations that we have had to the point of why they would say that. And then other people didn't. They would say, so mine that came back to me most often were motivator, was challenger, was seer, and there was the helper, the healer, and then the commander from my lovely wife. However, it was cool because in hearing the responses and also reading it for myself, I was able to form and bridge the gap of, okay, Rickey, you desire to speak in a certain way. You desire to have people feel and take away information based off of what you say. And in order to make that connection, in order to do those things, maybe there are some things you have to add to what you do when you speak. And there are some things that maybe you should address so that you aren't coming off said way in the way in which you speak, so that people don't see you in that form of frequency. And so it was cool, right? I was able to self-reflect. I finished the book probably 3 days ago. And then even with it, I was like, okay, that's true. Like, and the beautiful thing about YouTube is I can always go back to previous videos to see how I have come across, how the delivery has been, what I felt during the video, and what my takeaway was at the end of it all. Because ultimately, I do feel that there is the motivator side of me. There's definitely the challenger side of me. However, I only challenge people that I feel like I have a connection with, because if you don't, if you challenge somebody that you don't have a connection with, it could just, I don't know, it just feels weird at the end of the day. So I challenge the people that I love. I'm always motivated to the people that I'm around. I feel like there is the healing element. However, I say all that to say, to get to the point where professor is where I desire to lay my foundation at, which is one in which that teaches and brings new insights and ideas to people's understanding. And because that, I love reading, I love learning, and I realize that not only is knowledge power, but oftentimes we can get different places and spaces based off of what we do know. And we are therefore held back from different spaces, places, rooms, and opportunities because of what we don't know. And so when you are available, or when you do have information to come your way, you're able to do more. And so with that belief and with that understanding, there's the professor side of me that desires to give people an information, such as this book review that I'm doing right now. However, all in all, with it all, to conclude the first point, is the fact that as you read the book, even in its short amount of words and pages, which is great for people with short attention spans, you read the book and gain insights about yourself. But then as well, there's a challenge to gain insights on the way others perceive you and the way that you speak, communicate, and operate around them. And then based off of their feedback, their information, then you're able to make the necessary tweaks, adjustments, and, changes to be able to come across in a way that you desire to be received as you do speak, communicate, or be for people. So then that's the first point. But then the second point that I love and adore, because I am a father, I am a husband, I am a son, I am a friend, right? And the list goes on. I always, with those different spaces, desire for people to be heard around me, which I think leans upon the healer frequency of me. However, as the book goes about, it shares and speaks of how not only do these frequencies speak of how you speak, but it also speaks of how you receive from others. And so let's dive into that. So believe it or not, the way in which you speak also speaks to the way in which you receive. And so I'm definitely drawn into the videos that are sharing information, giving new insight, uplifting, motivating, and challenging me to higher heights. And so because of that, I also speak and deliver in that same format and way. So just think about it. That may speak to the way in which and how you receive from others. It may be why you can hear a great message or a great video or a great podcast from somebody, share it with the next person, and they not get the same excitement, joy, and experience that you had. It's because you all have different frequencies of communication as well as different frequencies of receiving communication. And that was insightful for me because it speaks to how my wife have different messages or different people that she listens to and will share with me. And I'm listening to it and like, I don't know, babe. Like, I'm not getting, or I can't stay focused to what is being said the way you are. But now I know it's because of the speaking style and frequency my wife speaks from, which speaks to the way that she receives, which is different than the way I speak from and therefore receive. But then on top of that, one of the things that I love and those aha moments came about was because it also shares and speaks to the way my kids, right? Because we're raising two beautiful kids, the great Rain Demi Jones and my awesome Rickey Jones III. And in raising them, we also speak to them. We also share to them. We also hear from them as they speak and share to us. And now I'm able to hear in a way in which they speak, which also lets me know of the way in which they will receive. And it was cool because I realized my daughter speaks in a way of motivating, of uplifting, and in a way in which is like a commander as well. So she has a little bit of that motivator, that commander, that challenger, but also that healer. Whereas in my son, I'm starting to listen more to him because he is one that, he more so is the maven. And if you read the book, you understand what the maven is and how the maven operates, which is a totally different frequency than the norm. However, a lot of the conversations that we have, a lot of the words that he says are like, okay, that's why. That's what that is. And I love those moments because it allows for me to better steward, to better parent, to better raise our kids, but then also do it in a way that works best for them. Because if I am being so like, commander mode on both of them, it may work. It will work for Rain, but it won't work for Rickey. And the beautiful thing about that is the realization that as parents, we can't raise our kids the same way. What works for one will work for the other. And what you do to one, you can't do to the other and expect the same result. However, again, this book has given me an insight to know of how our kids speak and how ultimately they will receive. But then again, the point being, you receive from the same frequency in which you speak from. Like, who would have thought it? Who would have thought? I never thought it. And I've read others' books on communication, other books on speaking and gaining new friends, and the list goes on. However, one of the aha moments that I'm appreciative of is the realization that as I speak, so do I receive. As our kids speak and the frequency in which they speak from, that is the same way in which they will receive. And so not only will I desire and stretch myself to speak better, but then I'll do so in a way that allows for them to receive better. And I'll be open as a father, as a parent, as a husband to receive, knowing that they, my kids, my wife, speaks from a different frequency in which I speak from, and being able to receive from them in that way. But then outside of our household, right, it extends into all in which I come in contact with, whether it's co-workers, bosses, preachers, pastors, friends, the list goes on. Everybody has a frequency. And the flip side of 7 frequencies, there are also 7 shadows that the book speaks about. And so there's a flip side to every coin in which you look at. There's a flip side to everything that you see in this 3-dimensional world. And so with the good, there's also the bad. And I won't share the shadow or the bad side of the different frequencies. You have to read the book to get it. However, I challenge you at the end of the day to get the book, to read the book, even if you are a communicator, but more importantly, if you are a listener, if you have ears to hear and people that desire to share information, knowledge, and words with you, this is a good book to even understand the ways in which people talk, speak, and share. So get the book, read the book. The link will be down below. I highly recommend it. It was beneficial for me, as I know it will be for you. Shouts out to Peter, Pastor, well, not Peter, but Erwin, Pastor Erwin, for writing this book and putting together this phenomenal knowledge treasure chest. Because that's what it has been for me, and an eye-opening awakening for me as well. And so with that being said, great people, I love you all. I appreciate you all. I hope this video has been beneficial for you as you are endeavoring upon communication, but more importantly, upon receiving and exchanging frequencies with others. I love you all, great people. See you in the next video. Until then, peace.